Okay, I'm right at 1.35K, so 1300 ohms. So I'm north of my 1100 mark. And I think in my spreadsheet I have this north of just right at 1200. So I'm not far off at all. But since I know I'm north of my 1100 ohms, I'm going to go ahead and cut the magnet wire at this point. Okay, you can see I'm well north of my desired weight, and looks like I'm about 308, 310 grams. Let me just let this settle again. Not sure why we're bouncing back and forth. We'll split the difference here, just say 311 grams. So let me look at the math again for 311 and just work that out, see if that matches the DC resistance. Okay, it ended up being my mistake. I think after about 2.5 hours winding the coil at 100 RPMs, lost my mind. But anyway, I think I put 1,000 rotations too much on the coil, roughly. It comes out to be about 952 feet. So not rotations. So anyway, about 9 wraps too much is what I'm guessing. So what I'm going to do is hook my drill here, make this the receiver, and I've got the rod here disconnected from the driver motor. I'll leave it that way, and I'm going to just unwind about, I'll go like 5 or 6 wraps. Then we'll check the DC resistance again, see if we can't get this thing just a little bit closer to the 1100 ohms or within 10%. Okay, good stopping point here. Again, I'm going to try to be sure I'm on the high side and not rewinding back to this coil. So again, this will be tamped from the drill here, and let me get just a little bit of slack here. Put a piece of tape back over this, and then let's go back up here and check the DC resistance again. See if I know we're moving in the right direction, but let's just see how close we are. See if that's enough insulation off. Okay, man, I did tighten. No, I got that really close. 1182. So I think I'm going to leave well enough alone. A little extra resistance won't hurt anything with the higher voltages anyway. Get just a smidget more voltage drop. So looks really good. Get that here under the camera so you guys can see that better. Hopefully it's showing up here. So I think we're set. I'm going to, again, just let it be 1182, and I'll document that. I'll make the cut here, and then we'll make a final resistance measurements here once I get the tabs and terminal points put on. Yeah, almost forgot. I need to measure this and see what we've got. Again, I'm in grams, and I'm showing 272. Let me go back to my original notes, what I was shooting for. Yeah, I was looking for about 245 with the form factor, so I'm just a little north of that, but my DC resistance is also just a bit north of 1100 ohms. So anyway, that's good to know. I'll jot that down here. So it'll be the final weight, again, minus the 12 grams for that empty spool. So it puts me at 260. Okay, again, here's a look at the coil. And again, we still got some work to do to tie in this lead and this lead and dress everything up so we can get this thing remounted. But I just double checked again and just make sure I didn't make a mistake. Somewhere around 1183 ohms DC resistance. So we're good. Then you can see here, if it's showing up on camera, using my fingers to guide the wire toward the end, I got some really good results. I think I probably will modify the coil winder at some point. Maybe even look at a different V-groove pulley and try to move that maybe more forward toward the coil. But always learning. That's the fun part about this hobby. Okay, time to triple check the coil to make sure we're good. There we go, 1182. So well within 10%. Okay guys, what I'm going to do is remove this tape here that I put on. We'll come back to this tape because we'll definitely use it. It's gaffer tape. And I think it's really close to what was used back in the day, which is really just a cloth-based tape. But what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take this winding. It's probably really hard to see on camera. And all I'm going to do is just back up here. Just before the point of where this other connection point comes out. And then I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go just past that and put this back on just for a minute. Now you guys saw me use some of this Kapton tape. I'm going to use it again. I'm actually going to wrap it around the entire coil. But let me just get a small piece right now just as a lead dressing. And then we'll wrap the coil for protection, and then we'll create some solder point connections for the for the field coil to be hooked back up at some point. Not sure this will show up on camera or not, but I'm going to apply a small layer of the Kapton tape right here in this area. Now I'm going to remove the gaffer tape. And what I'm going to do now is just route this wire which is the top layer of the coil, back over here next to the layer that was on the inside of the coil. And let me get some more of the Kapton tape now and just lay a strip down through here, then we'll wind the whole coil to protect it. Okay, there we go. Alright, now I'm going to wrap the entire coil in probably 3 or 4 wraps. Okay, you can see I have the coil now protected. And I'm just going back through here to make sure that I've got it attached well to the enameled wire. And it looks like we're good. Let's double check this side. Alright, let's look at what's next here. Okay, I got a piece of the gaffer's tape laid out here, and I think my rolls, well, you can see, is 2 inches. So what I want to do, the inside diameter of the field coil is right at 1.5. So what I want to do is just cut a strip of the gaffer's tape to be close to the 1.5 inch width, and wrap it around the coil. Keep my lead here out of the way. Okay, there we have it. Alright, now let's solder up these leads, and then we'll do a final wrap here. Then we'll check the DC resistance one more time. We'll set it aside and have this thing wrapped up. Okay, there may be better ways to do this, but on another field coil that I did many years ago, I believe, because I was not doing videos at the time, can't find any photos, but I used a terminal strip. And here I've got a TS2-E, and what I recall doing is just flattening this piece out here. And I like to keep the connection points on the outside of the coil instead of covered up, just in case I need to get back to it. I'm not unwrapping layers of tape or fish paper, and I'm not saying there's anything right or wrong about either method, but what we'll do is I'll mount this in this direction here, and then we'll solder the 2 lead connections here, and I'm going to use just mix up a little bit of a quick dry epoxy and attach this terminal strip here back to the gaffer's tape, and then we'll go back in after we get everything done. Then we'll retape around this area as well. But again, I'm going to leave the leads exposed, so if someone does have a problem with a solder joint or something, they can just access it in the future. Get even parts here of the epoxy out, and we'll stir it up for it's a little cold out here today. It's supposed to be down to 5 degrees tonight, so quite cold. We'll stir this here for about 2 minutes. Okay, looks like I've got the desired consistency here. So again, I'm going to place this on the field coil like so. So let me just dab a little bit of the epoxy on here. Then I'll apply some pressure for about 4 minutes and see if I can get this to set up. Okay, here you can take a look at what I've got so far. This epoxy here is still wet and setting up. But again, this outer lead is under this first or second layer of tape, so if we need to get to it in the future, we can. And then the outside, or excuse me, the far inside lead with the 22 gauge wire, I think it is. Again, I'm going to be soldering to this connection point. Once this epoxy here sets up, and I've just got a piece of heat shrink over the top of it, and I didn't apply any heat. I'm just using it as a guard only at this point. Then we'll get the enamel off the magnet wire at this point and loop it back through this point, and then we'll dress this up again after some of the epoxy sets up for maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Okay, here's the wire dressing that I was looking for. Again, you've got the lead that comes from the center. Again, it was soldered back to that number 20 or 22 gauge wire. And then the other outside wire, which would still be accessible if needed. Again, you can see it's wrapped back through here, goes through some heat shrink tubing, and just a quick epoxy, quick setting epoxy. We'll put a little bit of flux here, rosin flux, and then solder these two connection points up, and let's make a final DC measurement, and then I'll probably put one more wrap of the gaffer's tape from this point back to this point, and that's all we'll do. Okay, let's get the soldering iron tinned up here. And let me just put a little flux on. I've already cleaned these connection points as well. And I want to make sure we get a really good bead of solder down. I looped the magnet wire through there about 4 or 5 times and cleaned it off real good with sandpaper. So let's let that cool down now, and we'll check the DC resistance here and make sure we're still spot on. Okay, let's check the DC resistance here one final, well, not my final time, but my final time for this video. And you can see I'm north of my 1100. I'm at 1204. No big deal. I'm still within 10% of that 1100 number. And would anybody like to guess why the DC resistance is just a bit higher now than it was earlier? Hey, so for everyone that followed along, thanks for doing so. I appreciate it. The Field Coil evaluation led me to this. I had already started building the Coil Winder because I have another project that I want to do with the Coil Winder as well here in the upcoming months. And then I also decided I think I want to make another voice coil using the Coil Winder. So stay tuned for that as well. And just want to try that technique versus winding one by hand, and see if I'm able to produce one that's actually usable in a loudspeaker. But hey, this field coil turned out great in my mind. Again, I think it's a matter of preference whether to tape over these, cut them out. I like just leaving everything somewhat exposed. So again, if someone needs to get in here and troubleshoot later on, it's just a matter of unwrapping some of the tape here on the front side, and at least they can get to the the top layer. The bottom layer, probably just what happened with this particular unit in the beginning. If that's showing up, I had that burn hole right down here, and I think that's where my damage actually was coming from. So I think the field coil just opened up at some point in time, but again, this one should serve us well. Time will tell. Still got to recon the speaker. The weather's been brutal, and you saw the way I kicked the video off. We had some great snow overnight into this morning, and we're going to be down to about 5 degrees tonight, and I think 7 degrees the following night. So no time soon for rust removal or painting that old speaker basket. So we'll lay this off to the side and make sure that it doesn't get damaged, and then when time and the weather improves, we'll get back on the speaker, the reconing, and all the above. Until then, stay tuned. Again, I may play around with a voice coil, or I may start doing some of the recapping on the Philco ahead of the rust removal.